Hi, everybody. Sorry I can't be with you, but hey, life happens, and I'm gonna go celebrate the life of my last grandparent. So 99 years, man. She lived a wonderful life. Um, but since I can't be with you in person, I'm gonna go back and do something that hopefully you're familiar with from first semester. Is me sitting down in front of a camera and talking to you about a book. And so the book we're going to talk about is what we read on Thursday, the first chapter of Lord of the Flies. I know it was long. I know that I didn't really get the chance to talk much with you because you had your fire drill and class was cut short, and the first chapter is just really long and it is hard to get through. So I want to say thank you for just listening. So now I want to point some things out. Um, no grown-ups. There's no adults around. The first two characters that we meet in the opening pages is we first meet a young man named Ralph. He is indicated through when William Golding calls him the fair hair boy. We also meet another character. Unfortunately, we never learn his real name in this story, but he's referred to by a name that he was called when he was at school. And unfortunately, that name is Piggy. Piggy is a little overweight, has difficulty with asthma. Unfortunately, both of his parents aren't here anymore. He was raised by his aunt. He's very intelligent. Piggy makes reference to the fact that no adults actually know they're here. He tries to remind Ralph of something the pilot said before they took off on the airplane at the airport. It is one of your reading comprehension questions. But Ralph kind of ignores him. He plays around, he goes swimming in the lagoon. And again, Ralph's only 12. He's the oldest on the island. So it's not like he's exhibiting a high level of maturity. He just kind of wants to play around. And then we meet another character. We meet a young man named Jack. Jack is, if you're still noticing the whiteboard and the stuff that I wrote down on Thursday, Jack cares about power. He's very uncaring. If you turn to page, let's do this together. If you turn to page 20, so if you're getting a book, take a few moments. If you're the teacher and you need to pause this video to give students time to get a book, please do that now. But let's go ahead and pick up on page 20. And I'm going to point to the part near the second half of the page where it says, "But Mary do, please Mary do. But Mary do, please Mary do, can't we?" Then one of the boys flopped on his face in the sand and the line broke up. They heaved. It means to push hard. They heaved the fallen boy to the platform and let him lie. Mary do, his eyes staring, made the best of a bad job. "All right then, sit down, let him alone." "But Mary do, he's always throwing a feint," said Mary do. "He didn't give, and Addis, and at matins over the precentor." The last piece of shop brought sniggers from the choir, who perched like blackbirds on the crisscross trunks and examined Ralph with interest. So how did Jack treat this boy who was dressed in his full choir attire? It's all black, under this menacing and punishing heat, and he faints. So how does Jack treat him? Does he run to his aid? Does he say, "Oh my gosh, this person needs water, he needs shade"? No, he just lets him lie there. Doesn't come to his aid, expresses no remorse, no emotions of sympathy or compassion. That's who Jack is at his core. He's a very uncaring individual. We also meet a character named Roger. Now, again, if you're looking at the whiteboard, Roger is just the embodiment of pure evil. He is indicated on page 22. You can turn to page 22 for a second and go to the middle of the page where it says he hesitated. The dark boy, Roger, stirred at last and spoke up. Now, that's not a literal interpretation. Roger's not a dark-skinned individual. He is a light-skinned individual. All of these young men are light-skinned individuals. But the word dark is used figuratively as a metaphor, which is that Roger is a very dark figure. He's an evil figure. That's why I put Roger as the embodiment of pure evil in this story. The things that he will do, that you will read about, are horrendous. They're just flat out horrendous. He has no compassion whatsoever for human dignity or human life or just life in general. Roger is a sadist. And the definition of a sadist is someone who derives pleasure in causing someone else pain. So an example would be if someone was to push another human being down a set of stairs and they just laughed uncontrollably, almost kind of like the Joker in Batman, that's a sadist. They just find it hilarious and funny. And that's who Roger is. We also meet a set of twins. Their name is Sam and Eric. They do everything together. They're identical twins. They're not fraternal twins. They're identical twins. So they look the same. They sound the same. They move the same. It's almost like a mirror image of one another. So in this story, you'll actually see William Golding take both of the names Sam and Eric and put them into one word, which is called Samneric. So when we read that word or that name, it's indicating both of those individuals. We also meet a young blonde-haired boy, not blonde-haired boy, dark-haired boy. His name is Simon. And again, looking at the whiteboard near the top, I wrote down that Simon is pure heart. He is the antithesis or the antithesis of Roger. Roger is pure evil. Simon is pure love. He exhibits tremendous compassion and caring. And you'll hopefully notice in the upcoming chapters of the things that Simon does for others. And so what I would like you to start trying to think about is Simon as the Christ figure, because that is how he kind of acts, is very much like Christ. In the softness and the way that he communicates with others, and just his caring and his acts of devotion and acts of service to others. He is very much the Christ figure. Also in this chapter, we are introduced to an object. It's called a conch. I would encourage you to Google it. You should have hopefully seen a picture when you were doing the web quest of what a conch looks like, but it's an actual shell for a crustacean. It's a home for crustaceans. And as those crustaceans grow out of their shells, usually you can find a conch on a beach or in low-lying waters. And that's where this conch is found, is in the lagoon. So lagoons don't tend to be extraordinarily deep, maybe like a pool, a shallow pool. And so this conch is used as a horn. And so with the help of Piggy, Ralph blows into the conch and a sound comes out, which is heard, and it calls other children and individuals out from the forest or the rainforest or the trees to the platform. And so on the platform, they have a meeting. And Piggy is attempting to the best of his ability to take names. But at this meeting, there is something that has to be decided. And again, one of your reading questions. So how do they decide that? what happens to the person who is the loser in this activity, or excuse me, this action. What is given to this person as a result of losing. And that's all in chapter 1. And then the big event in chapter 1 really happens at the end, where Jack, Ralph, and Simon, they go on an expedition. And Jack actually has the only weapon on the island. He has a knife. Don't know how he got it. I don't know how a 12-year-old got a knife on an airplane, but he does. He has it. And he comes across an animal. So it's a pig. Okay? There are pigs on this island. And it is caught in what are called creepers. So creepers is another name for like vines. And so as this pig is squealing, screaming, attempting to free itself from these creepers, Jack takes the weapon and he raises his hand like this. But he hesitates. And so I'm going to read you that part. So if you're trying to stay with me, page 31. And I am going to go to the part near the top where it says, first paragraph, the 3 boys rushed forward. So if you can find that sentence, hopefully you can stay with me. Here we go. The 3 boys rushed forward and Jack drew his knife again with a flourish. So flourish, did it quickly. He raised his arm in the air. There came a pause, a hiatus. The pig continued to scream, and the creepers to jerk, and the blade continued to flash at the end of a bony arm. The pause was only long enough for them to understand what an enormity the downward stroke would be. Enormity, big, huge, monumental. Then the piglet tore loose from the creepers and scurried into the undergrowth. They were left looking at each other in the place of terror. Jack's face was white under the freckles. He noticed that he still held the knife aloft and brought his arm down, replacing the blade in the sheath. So he puts it back. Then they all 3 laughed ashamedly and began to climb back to the trek. I was choosing a place, said Jack. I was just waiting for a moment to decide where to stab him. You should stick a pig, said Ralph fiercely. They always talk about sticking a pig. You cut a pig's throat to let the blood out, said Jack. Otherwise, you can't eat the meat. Why didn't you? They knew very well why he hadn't. Because of the enormity of the knife descending and cutting into living flesh. Because of the unbearable blood. I was going to, said Jack. He was ahead of them, and they could not see his face. I was choosing a place. Next time. He snatched his knife out of the sheath and slammed it into a tree trunk. Next time, there would be no mercy. He looked around fiercely, daring them to contradict. Then they broke out into the sunlight, and for a while they were busy finding and devouring food as they moved down the scar toward the platform and the meeting. Jack is around Ralph's age, maybe 11, 12. It's not a definite, we never really learned a definitive age for Jack. But this is like a 5th or 6th grade human. And the enormity of taking a weapon and having it enter living flesh and to hear the piercing cries of pain of that animal, human, whatever, is something you can't unhear. You can't undo it. If you put a knife into something that's living, that scar, that hole, that laceration will be there. You can't take it back. And so you have to be committed to cause pain, to cause trauma, to kill. You have to be committed to do it. And so that's why he hesitates, is he's not ready yet. but it's not far off that Jack will do it. Because like he says, next time there will be no mercy. So hopefully this sets the stage for the chapters to come. But a couple other things I want to get over before I stop talking and give you the chance to actually make progress on some of your assignments. I'd like to go over some of the themes that we encountered in chapter 1. So we are really at this innocent stage in the book. This is a group of young boys and children. Again, children represent innocence and purity. The island at first seems like a beautiful paradise. You know, palm trees, sun, water, just a place of fun, maybe a Garden of Eden. Also, this idea of like civilization versus savagery. And what I mean by that is these boys are kind of still at the civilized stage. They're wearing their school uniforms. These young boys go to a private school, so that's why, you know, Jack and his choir were dressed in all black in their hats, and some of the school uniforms are gray with jackets and buttons and long socks. So they're very much still at this civilized stage. And again, this is also one of the reasons why Jack just cannot go through with taking a life. He does still operate under the idea that there are societal rules of right and wrong. And he is still influenced in that there's the part on page 31 where it talks about the unbearable blood. Well, yeah, one of the reasons that we would not go do the purge is because if we did that, there would be severe consequences for us. We would be held to a very high standard, maybe prison. Conflict. There is this idea of conflict between man and nature. So again, Jack and the pig. There's also the conflict between Jack and Ralph. And Jack cares very much about power. But again, you'll start to notice this more in upcoming chapters, but chapter 1 definitely sets the tone. Again, I went over the characters: Piggy, Ralph, Jack, Simon. If you notice on the whiteboard, Piggy is the smartest of all of these characters. He is the voice of reason. He's the intelligent one. And it's almost like living in real life, what we do to people when we don't listen to individuals who know what they're talking about. Because these young boys they ostracize Piggy. If you remember in chapter 1, Ralph, he tells the rest of the group that Piggy is to be referred by his name, Piggy. And Piggy says, "You told them, I asked you to, not betray my trust," and he does. So, Piggy is very pragmatic. He's intelligent. He's rational. He's hopeful. He's optimistic. He does represent science and the thoughts processes on which civilization depends. But he's also physically weak. He's very naive. And remember, he grew up in a sheltered experience. And so he doesn't really understand the true horrors of war and just what human beings are really capable of when there's no one around. I did want to point out the part where when Ralph kind of machine guns Piggy the first time he learns his name, this does indicate a state of war that is happening in their home country of England. The boys have left that country, and obviously how the actions of war are now becoming a part of how they play together. Ralph goes kind of machine gunsing. Also, the physical scar on the island. This is going to start to represent the emotional and the psychological scars that these children are going to experience. So if you remember in your web quest, you had to identify what is PTSD and what are some of the symptoms of PTSD, because these boys are going to experience that. And then last but not least, in chapter 1, we start to develop this long metaphor, which is this story ultimately is a question on what happens to the end of innocence. When the bubble of innocence is burst for a child, what happens? Is that person fundamentally changed, or are they not? And as I shared, I believe earlier in the week or last week when you were doing the anticipation guide and the web quest, the purpose for William Golding to write this book, it was an attempt to trace, the defects of human nature and society and tie those together. So what is wrong with society? Is that connected to our defects in human nature? Whether it is or not, don't know. That's up to you to have to figure out by the time the end of this book. Okay, I just took 20 minutes of your time. I'm sorry. Hopefully you have a framework of understanding for chapter 1. If you go to Google Classroom, there's 2 assignments posted for chapter 1, okay? Not due until the end of class on Monday. So you have plenty of time to do this. You have the weekend, you have Monday. Again, on Monday, you will still have vocabulary.com. But if you need additional time to make progress on both of these activities, you have Monday as well. So first activity is what is called a bell ringer. So that's what I'd like you to start with. Each chapter, I am going to assign a quote from William Golding. And what I'm going to ask you to do in 4 to 6 sentences is to respond to that quote. So chapter 1, if you open it up, the bell ringer for chapter 1 says, "Bit by bit, the Second World War really changed my view of what people were capable of, and therefore what human nature was." So here's what you're responding to. How does witnessing a war change one's opinion of human nature? Which current event has changed your view of what people are capable of? This could be something personal. It could be something that's going on in the world. It could be something you read about, saw on the news. It could be something historical. You're free to answer that question, okay? Then you have your reading questions. There are 12. So I have provided you the page numbers to where to locate the information. Please use Miss E for assistance. Please use each other for assistance. Please use the teacher for assistance, okay? Even if you need to send me a Canvas email, since I'm going to be at a funeral, it's okay. I will still respond. I'm a teacher. This is what I do, all right? So I hope you have a wonderful weekend. Don't stress too much over this work. Just get it done, turn it in, and then I'll see you on Tuesday back in class. We'll read chapter 2, and then we'll just keep on trucking. All right, ladies and gentlemen, have a wonderful weekend. Peace.